Welcome to Jewish Cinémathèque, where we meet some of the important faces involved with films that tackle aspects of the Jewish experience. Today I'm joined by producer-director Sandi DuBowski, whose film Sabbath Queen, shot over the span of 21 years, follows the journey of Amichai Lau-Lavie, from radical drag queen to influential rabbi at one of New York's most everyday friendly synagogues, the Lab Shul. Sandi's first film, the 2001 award-winning Trembling Before God, about gay Orthodox Jews struggling with their faith, forced a discussion across the Jewish community about this critical subject, bringing about substantial reflection and even some change. Also joining us is Rabbi Lau-Lavie, who traces his rabbinic lineage back 1,000 years and who grew up in a traditional home, his father the Consul General of Israel in New York, and uncle the Chief Rabbi of Israel. Sabbath Queen grapples with key issues of who we are and who we will be as a people in these difficult times.
I'm Amichai. I broke the law. According to our family story, I descend from 38 consecutive generations of rabbis. My grandfather, who died so brutally. My uncle, the chief rabbi of Israel.
I feel sorrow for a Jew who doesn't follow tradition.
In my early 20s, I was publicly outed and I did not give my consent. I came to New York in 1997. I discovered a way to be really who I am.
I've created this fictitious character.
L'Hadassah Gross.
The Sabbath Queen is almost in the house.
This is a fairy tale, but it's from the Bible, so it is true.
It's theater.
You take the traditions and you basically threw them away. You denied really who you are.
The next evolution, God optional, everybody friendly, congregation.
So many Jews are simply lost.
Women are claiming their right to pray the way I believe a Jew should be in the 21st century.
So we're pushing a lot of boundaries here to approach increasingly divisive voices.
I want peace and I want compassion for the victims. Will Hamas give you peace?
You're not going to have the same family experience that you had growing up. It's going to be different.
Intermarriage is ruining the Jewish nation.
What I was reading was saying you're finishing Hitler's job.
Questioning the faiths we grew up with was so painful. It's a family business, and it's what I want to do.
Beautiful, radical fairy Amichai. You want to be rabbi?
I want to go back to my uncle and say, okay, who gets to be a Jew?
A Jew who doesn't follow tradition, but to change it? Who are you to change it?
I think I'm doing the right thing. Sometimes I'm not sure. But a rabbi doesn't leave his congregation.
You do know I'm a fairy, right?
Sandi and Amichai, welcome to Jewish Cinémathèque.
Thank you.
So how did this whole thing begin? Sandi.
Well, Jerusalem. I was looking for people to be in Trembling Before God.
You had, yes.
And that was back in the 90s. And everyone kept saying, well, the chief rabbi of Israel's nephew is gay. You should meet him. So I met Amichai, and I asked him to be in the movie. And the film was very much about the struggle to belong within Orthodoxy. And so Amichai at that point was very much in a post-denominational place. There is debate whether he said, I want my own film, I don't do collage. But we became dear friends. And, Amichai's journey was really worth its own film. He has such a unique story and history and family and vision. So we began filming in 2003.
But he turned you down for Trembling?
It's okay, he was right.
And I was in one of the silhouettes in the background.
Oh, okay. Why did you turn him down?
It wasn't my story. By the time Sandi and I met in the late 90s, I had come out, forced out, frankly, but then owned my being a Jew who wants to figure out Jewishness on my terms, honoring where I come from and honoring the tradition I grew up with. But
as someone who decided to be as an out gay man, as someone who's questioning some of the male first doctrine, who's asking about Jewish life in this era where I grew up with didn't fit. So I left orthodoxy. I over the years used flexidoxy or polydoxy or paradoxy. But by the time Sandi and I met, I was really interested in exploring the kind of Jewish life that is less labeled and more open.
You said you were forced out. Israel, by the turn of the 21st century, was more, at least the Tel Aviv community was more open. Clearly, the Orthodox community was not.
In the early mid-90s, the notion of outing people who are somehow connected to power was a tactic among some gay media people. And longer story, it's in the movie. But I was outed against my wishes on Erev Rosh Hashanah, the eve of Rosh Hashanah in 1993 or 4. And I immediately took it from a curse to a blessing. And thanks to my parents' wisdom and holding, wasn't banished, but began my journey of reconciling what I inherited with what kind of life I want to lead.
And your family was supportive through all of this?
There were speed bumps, but there was a lot of learning along the way. One of the stars of the film is my brother, older brother, Rabbi Benny Lau, who from an early stage, having been very impacted by trembling, supported me, both as a brother and as a rabbi who understands that what got us here isn't what's going to get us further as far as the limitations on sexuality or on free expression, while having deep respect for Jewish law, figuring out the balancing act.
Your brother's an Orthodox rabbi, and you chose not to reach out to him immediately. What was your thinking?
I waited 13 years to ask Rabbi Benny. I think it was because we were still developing the story. And it only became clear when he showed up for Amichai's ordination. And that was such a big deal for him as an Orthodox rabbi to come to a liberal institution's
Which was the Jewish Theological Seminary.
Yeah. And then I felt like something in the rabbi to rabbi at that moment allowed a portal. And I asked him to be in the film, and I flew to Jerusalem a month later, and we filmed an incredibly moving interview. I mean, he told me that the closet is death. And having done Trembling and spent a lot of time with Orthodox rabbis struggling with homosexuality, this was a watershed statement and something that really marked him as someone who really held gay and lesbian people and Jews in his hands with great sensitivity and great heart and great compassion. And I just cried through that interview. I said, I wish every Orthodox rabbi were like you.
You used Benny in a brilliant, I think, a brilliant cinematic way. In effect, he almost is, along with Amichai, the narrator of this film. Mm-hmm. I mean, and I have to tell you, there were tears in my eye towards that moment when you see him at the ordination. Mm-hmm. But he struggles, and you magnificently really have him being shown struggling, even though this was an interview, a straight interview, but you broke it up in such a, your thinking was just, why did you take that approach?
We had a 2-hour interview, but in that interview, he really traced the arc from his real conflict and struggle with Amichai and his identity to this incredible arc of acceptance and embrace. Not without questions, they're on different pages, maybe politically, ideologically, there are differences, but there's love and respect within that difference. And I think we're in a time where, things are so polarized, and some of us have really lost the ability to talk to one another and to talk to people that we disagree with, and we're living in very fraught times. And I think for me, Benny and Amichai are role models of what it means to be connected and have deep relationship and disagree.
In Israel, Benny doing this really put his station at great risk. If I remember correctly, the chief rabbi of England didn't even go to his buddy's funeral because he had been a Reform rabbi. Was there any fallout for having really been there to support you, to come to the ordination? Or are we going to wait and see how the film is received in Israel?
Yes, and my brother is brave. How he stands up with me, for me, in solidarity of women rabbis and of religious Zionism. A year after October 7th, the rupture in Israel and in the Jewish world is so profound. He has 6 children in uniform at any given moment, and yet understands that what we grew up with, the type of religious Zionism we grew up with, isn't exactly manifesting as the roadmap to a safe, democratic, dignified, free, and justice-driven society. We're at a crossroads, and he's there. That's his main responsibility right now as a religious leader and as a leader. It begins in some way, or in some way it began for me as it did with him, with knowing that if we don't have room at our table for our openly gay Jewish family, well, who else don't we have room at the table for? Where have we become either or and can't handle more of the both and, of the openness that we grew up with, thanks to my mother and my father and what they brought, from the trauma of the Holocaust survivor that my father and mother bring, but also from growing up in homes where the notion of Torah and Derech Eretz, how to be fully a Jew and fully a mensch, goes hand in hand. So for Benny to be a leader of religious Zionism at this moment, to deal with families that want to accept their gay children, they come to him all the time. Families that are in the middle of these tensions over Haredi Jews and the army, the anti-war debate. I'm almost the least of his problems. But I want to say that it is all connected. It is about taking the Judaism we revere and love and saying what here needs to change for us to be better and do better. It's really baby and bathwater.
And this takes you back and forth between New York and Jerusalem, does it not?
I mean, this past heartbreaking year, I've been back and forth 11 times. I'm wearing this yellow bracelet that one of the women hostages 418 days later today, her grandmother gave this to me in mid-October. And I said I'd wear it until we don't need to. And I'm still wearing it. I keep going back and forth to be with my Israeli Jewish family, to be with my Palestinian peacemaker friends, to not give up on the possibility of getting beyond this major hump. My brother and I are not exactly on the same side of the political map, but we're on the same side of wanting to see Jewishness and Judaism alive and well, with humanity at the forefront. So I think that's where we connect, and that's why he supports this film.
When you started making this film, could you imagine? I mean, you began it really. You were following a drag queen. What was her name? Hadassah.
Rebbetzin Hadassah.
Rebbetzin Hadassah. So that's how the film, and it retained that name. Could you have imagined the evolution?
Oh, absolutely not. We had in the audience the other night. We had a little child ask, "Is there going to be a Sabbath Queen too?" I said, "How old are you?" They said, "I'm 7." I said, "Well, can you imagine being 28? That's like the lifespan of this work." So, I think there's a deep patience about witnessing the Jewish story through Amichai's life that I'm committed to. And, I think that it's extraordinary for us to kind of go through as Amichai wrestles and grapples with so many kaleidoscopic issues of what a Jew means now in the 21st century. I was there. I was there because I felt it was so urgent and important. And he just held so many of the questions that we're wrestling with. So yes, in the beginning it was performance art, it was drag, it was like, and then it got much more serious and deeper as Amichai took off the wig and took off the mask and really was there in a different way for people.
Burying
than
himself, truly burying himself.
Yeah, and then just being on stage. I mean, even for me, Amichai buried my father. You know, he was there sitting with my mom and I during a year of Kaddish. You know, he officiated my interfaith queer wedding to my husband, Eric. So I feel like Amichai has been there for me in moments of love, in moments of death, in all of the ways that we, you know, as Jews, but as humans, really grapple with all of the ways that we mark life.
21 years is a long time. How has your own Judaism changed? Sandi, I look at you during this period. I mean, you're with Amichai. You're almost living together. How has that changed?
Well, I think it comes out of trembling before God, because trembling actually made me become more Orthodox. You know, I would learn Torah every week with a Hasidic gay man for 2 years. You know, I did Shabbat with the Orthodikes, which is, yes, an incredible name for an organization. And I think I couldn't really find myself living a full-time Orthodox life. It just wasn't for me. With deep respect, and I have many, like, you know, incredible connection and memories, but I needed to find another path on my path. And I think Amichai opened a portal for me in terms of just trying to really reimagine ritual and reimagine tradition and do it in a way that felt so like that it was free in my hands, but he gave me the deep knowledge. So it wasn't just kind of willy-nilly, you know, no rules, like there's no basis, no halacha, no tradition. Like, I think he's walking that incredible fine line between innovation and tradition. And I felt really called to that path.
Everybody friendly. That's controversial. How has that impacted your life? I mean, you went to the Jewish Theological Seminary. This is one of the key moments in the film, so I don't want to give away too much. I don't want to spoil this. But the Jewish Theological Seminary, part of the conservative movement, very strong requirements in terms of officiating at Jewish or non-Jewish weddings. And here you are at an everybody-friendly synagogue.
When I created the everybody-friendly synagogue, there was the tagline that I chose, alongside God optional. If you're looking at the fact that 62 to 75% of American Jews, non-Orthodox, might be married to somebody who's not Jewish and not converting, those are the statistics. And so the question is, how do we welcome Sandi and his partner? How do we welcome people who may not have been born Jewish but want Jewish but might not be believers in God? That's increasingly the fact with people 40 and under, but want a spiritual experience. Want to be invited in without too much Hebrew or too much expectation of knowledge that they might not have. But they want a connection to the sacred. They want to know what Jewish life has to offer them, and they want community, they want connection, they don't want isolation. So it's my job as a 21st century rabbi to create the lab that I created, Lab Shul, together with amazing artists. So when people come in, they feel invited into their own connection with self and sacred, to meeting other people and being part of the Jewish community that is different than the one I grew up with. It's less insular, it's more welcoming, it's complicated. The 21 years of the film begin roughly with 9/11 and end with October 7th. A lot has happened in those 2 decades of the first 21st century, including the fact that in 2006, the conservative movement voted to allow me to become a rabbi and other LGBT students, that the United States chose a few years later to allow gay marriage to happen, that women rabbis began officiating in the Orthodox world, right? These are 2 major decades. We're going to look back at this film many years from now, and regardless of my story and Sandi's brilliant storytelling, this is telling us something about being a modern Jew in a new century that, as we speak right now, has many question marks. So I am learning from it how to not give up on the spirit that got me here, the belief that every human has dignity, that what got us here as Jews is a blessing, and it's going to have to change for Judaism to change. That we have to be very, very thoughtful of what do we keep of our past and what do we tweak, so that there is room at the table for more of us and that Judaism keeps evolving as it always has. And crisis is always an opportunity. We're in the middle of one of the most profound and painful crises.
Both here and in Israel.
In Jewish history. We don't know where we're going. We know it's big. Crisis is an opportunity for growth. And we must take very good care of each other and of this opportunity, not to repeat the mistakes of the past. Whether it's First Temple, Second Temple, exile, diaspora, civil war, the hatred that has ruptured us again and again, how do we come towards each other with a both-and approach and not an either-or approach? And that is really what came out for me from watching the film, from being in the film. Understanding that throughout my life, that's been my through line, the both-and.
You are meeting with congregants in the film. You had an amazing program called Storytelling that
Still goes on.
Still goes on. It's just incredible how you've taken Torah and you've, as a storyteller, you tell that story. And he's in your face every minute. I mean, how can you carry on doing that?
It's a spiritual exercise. There's a Jewish dictum I grew up with that is the backbone of my community, Shiviti Havaya Lenigdi Tamid. I visualize the divine in front of me always.
The camera is divine?
The eye of a human, the eye of a camera reminds you to be present. Hineni. And if you're on it, then you fake less, you dial in less, you are more present. And so the camera has taught me to not squander any opportunity to meet someone heart to heart, face to face, to see what is wisdom that's relevant for this moment. I've messed up 98% of the time. I might be messing it up right here and right now. But we at least attempt to be as present as possible. That's divinity. That's the Holy of Holies. And if we can do a little more presence and intimacy in a world of so much isolation and fear, Dayenu.
You're the filmmaker in his face. How did you get his trust? I mean, at the beginning you met, you talked, he turned you down for trembling before God. How did you gain that trust?
I think we built it on friendship. I think there was something important about being friends for a number of years before I started filming, but it wasn't always easy. I mean, there was definitely a lot of navigation about sort of sensitivity, and every word and every image in this film is a minefield. It's very delicate, especially all the worlds that we're bringing in, and Amichai lives in many worlds. Those worlds don't always see each other. His Orthodox world doesn't always see the storytelling world, The fairy world doesn't always see the JTS world. I think there's many worlds, and that's what's so incredible. So I think it was a constant dialogue between us, about how to approach each world with the most careful hand-holding. So that everyone felt like we could go to the intimate and vulnerable places, which you need as a filmmaker, to document, but we can do it, in a way with a process that feels like Amichai felt okay, and that he was being taken care of. So it was not easy, but I'm really proud of this relationship, of manifesting this friendship, this rabbi congregantness, this director and protagonist. It's a very multi-layered relationship, unlike almost any other film.
You began this in 2002.
One. Yeah.
2003.
Three. Yeah.
Three. Okay. And at what point did you say to yourself, I've had it. It's time to just release this darn film? And I'm sure by then you had lots of footage. How much footage did you have, by the way?
We had 1,800 hours of original material. We had 1,100 hours of archival film and video. We had hundreds, maybe even 1,000 photos. It was Herculean. Yeah.
So when did you decide that or were there many moments when you said to yourself, okay, I think I've got it, and yet?
Well, we left no stone unturned in the editing. I had an incredible team. I think it was where, not to spoil, but definitely when Amichai made a very consequential decision, and one that could be right in so many ways. It was a choice between, very complicated outcomes, And then he paid a price for that choice. And I think narratively, when Amichai paid a price, it felt like, aha, this is the end of the film. This is a microcosm of so many of the issues that we're dealing with.
We're not telling you what that choice is because that would be a spoiler.
Yeah.
But it's clearly central to this film.
Yeah.
He makes this choice, and it has repercussions. And then October 7th comes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you are out there with signs supporting Israel, but also supporting the people of Gaza. And people are looking at you and saying, why weren't you killed in the Shoah? Why weren't you murdered, you Jew hater? How did that make you feel? Here you serve, you're an Israeli.
The scene you're talking about in the film is from 2014, where I showed up for a Support Israel rally as a supporter of Israel and solidarity with my family and friends, but also saying we must mourn with Gaza. It isn't either or. As humans, we have the legacy. As Jews, we have the legacy. And as victims, we have the responsibility not only not to be victimizers, but to have empathy and chemla, and stand with. Not either or, with. Not instead of, with. That was really tough.
Stand with Israel.
Stand with Israel, stand with Palestine, stand with innocent people who want to live together, stand with a narrative of two-state, four-state, whatever it is. What we have here isn't tenable. It isn't tenable strategically, militarily, it isn't right ethically. I'm not going to get into the politics right now of where we are. Right now, too many lives have been lost, too many prices are paid for this idea that I believe in deeply, of a Jewish state, of the homeland that I fought for. And my father came from the Shoah and my mother moved to Israel to build, and is there at 95 years old with 4 generations that she has built there. Amen. And it can't continue as it does. So when people come to me and say, as they will, perhaps watching me right now, how dare you be in support of Palestinians? There's no one to talk to, they want to kill us. I get that narrative. We inherited a narrative of either or. Cain or Abel, Isaac or Ishmael, Yaakov and Esau, brothers.
Straight or gay.
Straight or gay, right? It got us here. Patriarchy, tradition, kosher, treif, goy, Jew, got it. And I'm not saying blend it all. One size fit all is one size fit none. There's room for what and how we preserve. But what got us here won't get us further as far as Jews choosing to fall in love with people who are not Jewish. How do we welcome and make that a reality that's not out, but indifferent? We have an Israeli-Palestinian reality that's going to have to include 2 nations, the children of Abraham. This is a family feud, and we've got to solve it. And what we inherited gives us the tools for shalom bayit, for making peace, but we have to let go of some of our dreams, some of our assumptions, so we can dream new dreams and reconcile. We have a rare opportunity being back in Israel. I'm there back and forth because my heart is there in so many ways. And I feel like the divine presence, the Shekhinah, who's also the Sabbath Queen, is rooting for us to figure it out. Because peace, shalom, is not an abstract idea. It's what we say in every prayer, every Kaddish we say ends with Oseh Shalom. And it begins with us, so that the rest of the world can follow along. You know, when Sandi came up with the title Sabbath Queen for the film, for years the title was Rabbi, and it was very awkward. They called me and said, how about Sabbath Queen? Now, Lab Shul, my community, has a monthly ritual which is called Sabbath Queen, which is our version of Kabbalat Shabbat, with music and meditation and food and a sermon. It's prayer with a twist.
Just to interrupt, when you welcome in the Sabbath, you're welcoming the Sabbath Queen.
Absolutely, that's Jewish tradition, but does anyone ever ask, what does that mean? Who is she? What is that? So we've taken this idea of the energy of the feminine, non-masculine, non-binary, fluid. And in many ways, for me, Shabbat is the crown of the week and the set table and the invitation to create sacred space together. People are hungry for it. So Sabbath Queen was a way to bring the sacred with a wink. My drag career is over, but what she gave me is this notion of really honoring the somatic and the sensual and the sensory in a way that is sacred, that I inherited and many people want to get a taste of. So there's an opportunity here to bring the best of Jewish wisdom to people who want it, as we grapple with the worst of Jewish expression, which right now is taking so many of the headlines. And I don't want to be supremacist, and I don't want to be racist, and I don't want to be a homophobe, and I don't want to be a misogynist. I want to be someone who takes my tradition in this relay race, the many rabbis that I have the privilege of sitting on their shoulders, and I want to be a good ancestor and say that we received this treasury and we're not leaving it as is, we're perfecting it. Tikkun olam, that's what we're doing here. That means some changes, some of them more painful than others. But at the end of the day, I'm a storyteller, Sandi is a storyteller, and the story that he's told about me, we're both in the service of a much bigger story that is unfolding right now.
And it challenges you and it asks lots of tough questions.
As a good story should.
Absolutely. Sandi, what's next?
Well, we premiered in Tribeca Film Festival in June. It's been 5.5 months, so we're still a baby. We're still a little baby as we move into the world. It is clear that whether it's Leipzig, which I just came from, or Zurich, or Rome, Amsterdam, London, Martha's Vineyard, to Nashville, to Birmingham, to San Francisco, to LA. This film is just going everywhere. It is clear that we are now going to have quite a big theatrical release. We're in IFC Center in New York. We're being held over. We were the biggest box office weekend of any documentary in that theater for this whole year.
Wow.
We're opening LA, the Laemmle theaters. We're going to go everywhere, pretty much every city. And I think millions of people will see it. Now, one thing that we have learned is that there's an intergenerational conversation that's broken down. That there are boomer and Gen X parents who can't speak to their 20 and 30-something kids or teenagers, that there's grandparents who don't, there's a lot of people who've stopped speaking to each other. And we're doing an intergenerational project. We also are raising funds for a Sabbath Queen education campaign to really bring this to college campuses and to high schools with appropriate facilitation and materials for study guides. And there's a lot of work to do with this film in the world. And if the work is in the US, the work is in Israel, the work is global.
When is the film coming to Israel?
End of December at the Jerusalem Cinémathèque and in Tel Aviv.
It's part of the Jewish Film Festival.
Yeah. And I got an interesting email from Rome. I had a woman who saw the film at the Rome Film Festival email me immediately and say, I thought all Jews were fundamentalists. I didn't know. Here you are, a Jewish director, bringing this kind of progressive Jewish liberal vision, and you upended my assumptions. You actually broke my polarization. She's like, you really made me think, and thank you. So I think we're doing a service here for Jews, for non-Jews, for so many people across who are all struggling with tradition, with ancestry, no matter where they come from.
The film is called Sabbath Queen, Shabbat HaMalkah. See it. It's incredible. And bring along some handkerchiefs, because you're going to be teary-eyed and you're going to be spending a lot of time talking to your friends about what you just witnessed. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you so much.
Really,
Thank you so much.
Thank
pleasure.
you. Thank you.